To walk in and really be shocked is a real treat, because it rarely happens. Just on the materials and the process, the view clearly is spectacular. It's definitely a party space, no doubt about it. Okay. Hi, I'm Sue Hostetler. Edward Sanford has long family ties to the Nantucket Waterfront. He and business partner Greg McKechnie show us the cottage Peru, which sits right on Nantucket Harbor.
Tell us a little bit about Old North Wharf and your family's history with this area.
My dad and uncle bought North Wharf in 1964 from the Everett family. Actually, the interesting part of that story, which nobody really knows, is that the Everetts were trying to keep it out of the hands of Walter Beinecke, who was in the process of buying up all the commercial part of downtown Nantucket. And they were not happy with that. You know, nothing much has changed.
Yeah, so the story goes.
So anyhow, they approached my uncle and dad and made them an offer, and so they bought it in the early 60s. And then my brothers, sisters, and myself took over in the early 70s. So we owned and we operated it as rental cottages. That's basically what the wharf was, probably from the mid-20s until the mid-90s, when we decided to sell it, and we came up with the idea of turning it into a cooperative. I still own one, my brother still owns one. I have a cousin that owns one.
You actually let me stay in yours the night of my wedding.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
Lydia.
Right.
That was really
nice
cool.
Guy.
You are a
That
nice
was before
guy.
we were partnered.
It's a very exclusive club down here.
Absolutely. You'll never get in.
I'm never getting in.
Look at that. I don't believe this.
So Edward, you were down here in 1991 for the perfect storm?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was a lot of fun. I was living here year round in the house right behind us. It was October 30th, 1990, and it was interesting because the weather people on the TV were talking about this really odd weather pattern, and I think the storm hit on a Tuesday. And I can remember Sunday night watching the Boston weather and watching the weatherman saying, you know, this is unusual, and I don't like what's going on. And it was windy down here, but it was hard to believe that anything really terrible was going to happen. But the afternoon, I think it was Tuesday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, was the third successive day of strong northeast winds, and I noticed that at low tide, the tide was higher than high tide.
2 more hours until high tide. Look how bad this is. This one's floating.
And so at that point, I realized we were in for trouble.
We have a problem, and not much we can do about it.
There's not much we could do about it. I took Christine and Henry and our dog and our cat, and we went up to an office we had on Main Street, right at the foot of Main Street. So the next morning, we came down, and basically the wharf was littered from here all the way down to Easy Street with parts of little cottages.
Were any of these still standing?
They were gone.
Gone.
Didn't even know they were here. The pilings were gone. Everything was gone.
Amazing.
That was the beginning of the reconstruction, and we spent that winter fixing up all the houses that stayed. We had to do a lot of work to them because there was a lot of flood damage. And then in the winter of 1992 and 93, we rebuilt the Zenith's coffin and the Peru and the Edward Carey.
I was talking to the owners of Peru about some of the things they went through with building, and she was telling me a story about the electrician standing in a rowboat underneath doing the wiring, and I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like it's OSHA compliant. But
when the tide comes in, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, building down here has to have its restrictions and limitations.
But the new houses are built correctly. They're up to the proper elevation, and the pilings actually go into the base of the wharf, which the old cottages, which were built back at the early 20th century, were just built on top of the riprap. And this stuff that you look down here is the original part of the wharf, which was constructed back in the late 1700s. And when they went to build these cottages originally, they just basically put the pilings on top of this stuff. So there was nothing really
secure.
And they were much lower. They were about 3 feet lower because they weren't worried about, rising sea levels and things like that. So the new houses were built with modern engineering standards. I guess we're going to go in and look at Peru in a minute.
Yeah.
When you showed the house to your clients, what was it about it that they liked?
They're clients, they're friends. We worked together for a long time, and they have another house, and we're always looking. And we were driving through town, and I turned right down Old North Wharf, and they, what are you doing?
They
Where are you
probably
going?
didn't even know it was here.
They
right?
didn't. They had no. They'd never been down here, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I said, you guys like different things. Well, I got something different for you. I opened the gate, and we start walking down the catwalk, and I said, this is Peru, and they just jaw dropped.
They got it.
I knew I had it right then. So at that point, you had it listed. That was before you and I had partnered up in Great Point Properties. And I explained to them, like we discussed, that you can't do this again. This is something you'll never have again.
Well, the great thing about the wharf that I've found is it tends to weed out people of certain personalities, and you've got to have a little bit of a sense of humor, be able to go with the flow, not worry about the 500-year storm that might show up, and just take it all in and enjoy it, because that's really what the place is all about.
In this unit, there's just so many little things, like the hatch inside. When you're in a shower upstairs, you can talk to your guests downstairs, which you don't see that very often.
That's an important feature, when you're in the bathtub, to be able to continue the conversation.
You shouldn't end the conversation there. They wanted to keep the nautical feel, so they really made a point of things that I've collected, the perfect things, and there's things from Gloucester, Mass. There's things from Virginia. There's things from all over, Kennebunk. There's boats.
Before the house got knocked down, this little closet, back in the old days, it used to be a little toilet in there. And the pipe just went below the floor and was cut off. And that was the good old days, So when we rebuilt the house, I didn't put that feature back in. It's just a nice little closet.
We need a half bath. They use this more as overflow, and they come down here and have lunch and cocktails, and the owner uses it as a office away from his house.
I'm jealous.
I'm too. I would never, the view out of his office window, I wouldn't get anything done. And it's fun, because down here you get to see things happening.
I'm not sure who named the cottages, but again, I was talking to my mom, and I thought that when my dad and uncle bought it, that my uncle actually went to the whaling museum and got the names of the whaling ships and named the cottages, but that turns out not to be the case. They were named when my mother can remember, which is back in the early 20s, but they're all whaling ships. So Peru, Zenith's Coffin, Nautilus, Lydia, John Jay, Constitution, they were all whaling ships. So it's sort of neat.
Very special spot.